Hello, it's Mo, and welcome to the ADHD Energy Strategy weekly podcast where we dive deep in areas that really matter, can make a change in your life. And today I want to talk to you about paralysis because this is one of those things for ADHDers, especially that is really sticky and always feels really ambiguous. And I feel like it's time that I share what I believe is going to change the way you interact with paralysis when it happens. And what brought this up is because I keep seeing posts that are like, what's one tiny tip or what's one tiny hack that will help me start this task? And I get why people ask this question. It's a really frustrating experience to be in a state of what feels like paralysis. And people love the idea of a hack and a tip. And I usually get really frustrated at hacks and tips because they aren't sustainable. They don't even work a lot of the time, especially the types of hacks and tips you get around paralysis. And I'm going to give you some examples real soon. So let's talk about what you can do instead. People love this type of actionable advice. So it feels good when you reach out and go, hey, I'm feeling stuck right now. What's one thing I can do? And if there's one thing, of course, that can get you moving, you want to do that. And I'm not saying that these tips are wrong, but sometimes they're incomplete. Sometimes people feel like they genuinely help, but typically I feel like we're missing something because buried underneath all of those questions around tips and hacks with paralysis is a big assumption. And the assumption is that you already have enough energy. So, of course, you're asking this question. All right, what do I do about this paralysis? Okay. The assumption is you already have enough energy. You already have enough executive functioning. You already have enough emotional stability and enough recovery, enough nervous system capacity, and enough margin to actually use the tip. You see what I mean? This is why I say a lot of times energy strategy and energy budgeting, understanding your energy is so important because everything else in your life is downstream of your energy. The tax and the hips. The hips, the tips and the hacks. Oh my gosh. Maybe I just need to slow down. I'm trying to get this newsletter out before 11, so I'm rushing. Which call it an energy. You tell me. Energy cost, energy credit. Anyway, let's get back to the moral story. The idea is everything is downstream from hacks and tips, mindset, and all of this. If you don't have energy in the moment, what does it matter? We know how that works. So it's not always true. When you're like, okay, what's one thing that I can do right now to change everything? And it's not always one thing. And why am I talking about this? The conventional wisdom out there is that maybe you're just having a lack of motivation, the idea that there is something that you can push through in the pursuit of productivity and achievement. And the reason I want to make this episode is because I keep seeing ADHDers beat themselves up over what you might call couch paralysis. They say things like, I know what I need to do. I want to do it. I've tried all the tricks and the hacks. I've watched all the videos. I've read all the productivity books, and yet I'm still feeling stuck. What's wrong with me? And then you ask this question, right? Someone then suggests to you that you should count to 5, or you should put on a timer, or you should put your shoes on, or make your bed, or take one tiny step. And hey, none of these things are bad advice. But the idea is that when you're in this type of a state and those suggestions don't work, sometimes you assume that something's wrong with you. Like, oh, well, this is just me having jacked up ADHD brain and blah, 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 And it's not that the advice is wrong, because that's actually what's happening. The advice is not right for what you're experiencing. And I've been watching this pattern for years. I've experienced it myself. And I think it's making me feel like, at least from where I'm standing as a coach, as a person, longtime ADHDer, that we are solving the wrong problem. Let's talk a little more about what I notice here. Here's a little bit of a different perspective for you. This episode is going to challenge traditional views around this couch paralysis vibe. that stems from energy management rather than you lacking willpower and motivation like it's some type of thing wrong with you. And I keep seeing it. People treat energy problems, this is an energy problem, like a motivation problem. People treating nervous system problems like discipline problems. They treat recovery like a productivity problem. And people also treat overwhelm like they're just being lazy. And I feel like lazy is getting thrown around a lot on social media right now, and probably less and less we feel like we're just being lazy. I hope. But some people do. Some people still have that word lazy in their mind. They're like, "Well, I guess I'm lazy." At some point maybe someone called you that and you've decided that's what it means and that's what it looks like. But what I've seen and what I've realized is that a lot of people don't have a starting problem. They have an energy cost problem. So that changes it. And some of the patterns that I've observed, I'd like to share with you a little bit of an ADHD energy translation, how I translate this through an ADHD energy budgeting lens, is that most people will call what you're experiencing procrastination or paralysis, whatever you might want to call it. But I would rather call it an expensive start. Most people think it's some type of problem. It's actually a signal. Most people think it's about behavior when it's actually about energy. The behavior is visible, and the energy equation that's underneath it usually isn't. And when you think about what's actually happening here, when you actually start understanding energy a little bit differently beyond that simple, well, let's figure out how to motivate you kind of vibe. Imagine that, for example, that someone asks, what's one tiny trick that helps you start your car? Okay. Now imagine we answer that question without checking. So the idea is, what's one tiny trick helps you start your car? Okay. Answer that question right away. Just shoot the answer right away before you check important things like, is there gas in the tank? Could the battery be dead? Is the engine overheating? Are the tires gone? Did somebody steal the tires? And I know that sounds really crazy, but that's exactly what a lot of productivity conversations sound like to me. We just jump right into the trick. We skip the diagnosis altogether. We don't do a holistic approach. Like what's actually going on with this car? We just like, here, let's do this. We skip the diagnosis. And what if the reason starting feels impossible is not because you're missing some type of hack? You heard them all. What if the cost of starting has just become incredibly expensive? Because here's what I see underneath paralysis all the time. And I'm going to give you a list. It usually points to one of these things, multiple, all of these things. It could be any of these things. What's underneath it? What's going on? Okay. We got to figure this out first before we figure out what to do about it. It's the appropriate diagnosis. I'm not a doctor. I'm just saying you're diagnosing what's going on in your own physical, energetic, mental, emotional, nervous system encapsulation inside your body type of vibe. What's usually underneath couch paralysis, if you want to call it that, or procrastination, all those things: accumulated recovery debt, decision fatigue, transition costs, all these things packed on each other, or maybe just one at a time that's just enough, sensory overload, task ambiguity, burnout, grief, stress, sleep deprivation, maybe illness or demand avoidance you're experiencing. These things are costs. And so before just saying, what's a hack? What if we started here and say, okay, what's going on underneath this exactly? This is a really great start because these are costs to your system, and every cost gets added to the price tag of starting. And at some point, your brain looks at the bill of what it costs to get started, and they're like, okay, no thanks. And it has nothing to do with laziness. It's that the task costs more than your available capacity can currently afford. It's too much. And here's why, And so we slow down, ask those questions. We start knowing how to treat ourselves a little differently. So, the core issue here when we unpack paralysis, it's not about wanting to do something, it's about the cost of starting. And it's about assessing energy debt and recovery and the nervous system's role in the activation that you're experiencing. So let's talk a little bit about the energy costs and credits, the energy math, the potential costs, and how we can earn and manage energy credits. The energy math looks like this. You've got some potential costs here: emotional labor, recovery debt, maybe overwhelm, transition costs. I'm repeating myself, but these things are really great to remember. Things like sensory overload and decision fatigue, perfectionism. Maybe there's a little bit of fear of failure built in, or even fear of success. Like, oh my gosh, what if this is so successful? It becomes way too much for me to handle. And I feel like there's all these other things I haven't thought about yet. And, and so we can get a little spiraled out, a little bit of uncertainty, maybe life stress. But there's also potential credits here, things that can support us in these moments. And not all of them can be done in the moment, but these are things that can contribute to in the moment. We like to think about energetic events like this. When I think about a credit, I like to think of the before, during, and after. Before an energetic event, during an energetic event, and after an energetic event. What are some credits? Things like rest before the energetic event could help us maybe experience a little bit less of these symptoms. Having clarity, maybe you need clarity around this. What would give you clarity? Maybe you need some support. What kind of support do you need? Maybe you need co-working or momentum. What would be something that would help you get momentum? Maybe you're like, that's too big of a question. Maybe there's novelty that you're seeking here, and that would be supportive for you in this moment. Maybe some type of interesting way you approach it could help, or structuring it a little bit different, or reducing the expectation of what's going on. Feeling emotional safety. So when people ask, why can't they start? I'm often less interested in the task itself and more interested in what happened before the task, because that's usually where the answer lives. And that helps us a lot for reducing symptoms and experiences like paralysis. What are things that contribute to you being in states of paralysis more often, so that we can serve you in a way that doesn't happen as much as maybe you experience it now, or that it's less intense when it does, or you have more resources available to you when you are in that type of a state. Like I like to say a lot, with ADHD, you never get rid of all these things entirely, but we can reduce them. We can make it less intense when you're experiencing them. And we can give you plans so that when you're in that kind of a place, in that kind of a state, you know exactly what to do. And this is usually where the answer lives. What happened before? What's affecting the margin? What's affecting your ability to recover? What's affecting your available capacity? That also slows us down and gets us away from the task itself. And we're more in a state of self-service so that you can show up how you want to show up. So let's think about it through multiple lenses. So, like, for example, the individual lens. Maybe you're exhausted or grieving or overloaded. Maybe your nervous system is asking for recovery, begging for recovery. If you think about it through a conditioning lens, many of us were taught that if something is hard, we should push harder. And that is not usually helpful for an ADHDer. Sometimes when you're flying on energy and feeling motivated, it's fine, But we learn that effort has been and always will be the answer to everything. We've learned that at least at some point. Maybe some of you listening right now, you don't feel that way, or watching. Hello. So when effort stops working, we blame ourselves. If you look at it through a relationship lens, sometimes people around us unintentionally can increase the cost with pressure and expectations, or criticism, or constant interruptions, lack of support. All these things affect the energy equation. When you look at it through a systematic lens, many people are trying to function inside systems that weren't built for neurodivergent brains. Workplaces and schools and just productivity culture itself and schedules and noise and constant accessibility, being available all the time in all kinds of different ways. The environment matters. When you think about it on a spectrum lens, not every ADHDer experiences this in the same way. Some people shut down. Some people totally spiral. Some people hyper focus on something completely unrelated, you know? And some people become emotionally flooded. Maybe you feel all these things. Some people can keep functioning while paying attention to the enormous hidden cost. So this experience is not universal. We all experience it a little bit differently. And ultimately, when you think about shifting your approach to your own energy management, if it's an energy cost problem, the solution will never be about willpower, but about managing energy, lowering task entry cost, and ensuring proper recovery. Instead of asking, what's the trick that will get me moving? Maybe ask instead, what's making starting feel expensive today? That question gives you options. That question is the answer to what you're experiencing. It unlocks what may be the solution. Maybe the answer is recovery. Maybe the answer is reducing the task. Maybe it's asking for help or postponing. Maybe it's removing a barrier or realizing that there's nothing wrong with your brain at all, that you're responding to real conditions. And by the way, that's not the end of the process. This is just the beginning, because in ADHD energy budgeting, identifying the cost is usually the diagnosis step. Before I wrap this up, I want to be careful about a few things. I'm not saying that productivity tools are useless, and I'm not saying that timers don't work or that tiny steps don't work. All those things totally work sometimes, and I utilize all of those things in all kinds of different ways. These are tools. What I'm saying here is that tools work differently depending on the energy state they're being applied to. So this experience is not universal. People have different loads and different responsibilities, and we all have different resources and support systems available. We each have a unique nervous system and different lives, and that kind of context matters a lot. That's why I love ADHD energy budgeting. That's why I'm so obsessed with understanding your own individual experience through the lens of ADHD energy budgeting, because you're able to take that context into consideration when you're applying solutions to the problems you have. And a hack and a tip is a pretty universal, may not work kind of deal. You see what I'm saying? So here's what I know. Energy affects behavior when you put it all on the scale. Recovery affects the capacity you have available, and margin affects your follow through. Margin being the space on your calendar, the space in your brain, the space to breathe. Invisible costs still count. And I've seen these patterns myself. I've seen them in coaching clients. I've seen them across the ADHD community over and over again. The more accurately people identify costs, the less they blame themselves. And that changes a whole lot for people. And if you take one thing away from this, just let it be this. The question isn't, what's the trick? The question is, what is the cost blocking the start? This is a great place to begin. I'd like to share an energy experiment with you today. Here's something you can try this week or the next time you find yourself stuck. Instead of asking, why can't I just do this? Which we all have done. Instead of asking, why can't I just do this? Ask instead, what is making this expensive right now? And write down every possible cost. And the idea is not to fix it or judge it, what's going on. The idea is to just observe what's going on, what's happening in your life, giving yourself a little bit of breathing room here, maybe lack of sleep or the uncertainty of what's in front of you, or maybe there's a big emotional load here you're not even taking into consideration, or sensory overload, or recovery debt. Just get curious and see what you discover, because you can't work with a cost that you haven't identified. That's what I'd like you to know today. I would love to hear from you about the way you experience this and how you find approaching paralysis the next time you experience it, when you, instead of trying to figure out what can get you to start, which I know feels like the thing that is the next thing. You know what I mean? You're like, hey, I don't care about any of this shit right now. I just want to start this project. You're wasting my time, you know? I'm asking you to try this. And once you get to that step, we can talk a little bit more about what's next. But we can't appropriately provide a solution for you if we don't fully understand the problem that's happening. The problem isn't alone, I can't start, although that's why we're here, right? It's like, oh, I want to do this thing, I'm not able to do this thing. And we start figuring out what's underneath the cost. So I'd love to hear from you. What's your biggest hidden starting cost, maybe that you've discovered? What tends to make tasks expensive for you? Like, oh, this is so hard to start, and before I even begin, it's looking like all of these things are contributing to where I'm at right now. Then we start figuring out, okay, what would help lower the price tag on that, the cost of that? I'd love to hear from you in community, in school. It will be linked underneath in this video, in this podcast link, if you're listening. And let's just talk about it, because the more we have language for our energy, the better we can work with it. And that's what ADHD energy strategy is all about. The more we can normalize these conversations, the more we can actually support ourselves in a way that helps move this forward. My name is Mo Holloman, as you know or may not know, and I am an energy strategist for ADHDers. I am a coach, I am a speaker. I am so obsessed with getting to the root of anything in your life that is causing you to feel stuck. So let's process through this together. Tell me what comes up for you. Tell me what still feels stuck. And if you're like, okay, yeah, but what's next? Go to school, let me know. And maybe that's the next video. Is that what you'd like to hear next? We've only got about 20 minutes here, so I want to keep these short. If you want to know what's next after that, let's talk. I can't wait to hear from you in our community.